The first Triple Crown event of the season is just around the corner. We already know the top 16 seeds guaranteed to be at the Barbican, and now it's just a small matter of finding out which 16 qualifiers will join them for the first round proper. And as I have done for the past couple of seasons now, I will be going through the entire qualifying draw, identifying the key players in each section, and seeing if there may be any underdogs who could cause some problems as well. And we'll start right at the top of the draw. Chris Wakeling was the unlucky man to finish just one place outside of the top 16 going into the UK Championship, and worse still, he was set to be a seed up until the point that Wu Yize won the International Championship to bump him out. The biggest threat you'd have to say to Chris here is the world number 48, Liu Haoshan, but outside of a run to the quarterfinals of the Xi'an Grand Prix, it has been a very quiet season for Liu so far. The 2003 UK champion Matthew Stevens is also knocking about in this section, and he has beaten Judd Trump this season, but again, doesn't really have much else to write home about. I do think Matthew only really gears himself up for the big events nowadays, but it is tough to see him getting the 2 wins he needs to qualify this year. Mitchell Mann, you would suggest, is the only other key player in this section after his run to the quarterfinals at the British Open, but again, it was a run of form that came a bit out of the blue, and he has also been lacking in consistency. Chris Wakeling hasn't really been able to kick on from reaching the semi-finals in Saudi Arabia in the summer, but I do think this is a fairly kind section for him, and I fancy him quite strongly to make it through. Going into section 2, and I think Jackson Page may be my favourite to get through here. Again, despite just one good performance at the English Open, it has been a quiet season so far for the Welshman, but in general, his consistency has become a lot better over the past couple of years. He qualified last season when he went on to lose against Mark Allen in the first round, so he will be looking to repeat that here again. Yuan Xijin is the highest ranked player in this section at 31 in the world, but again hasn't been picking up too many notable results this season, and in fact has only gotten past the last 32 of an event on one occasion. We've got Michael Holt as well, who I suspect might be who people fancy the most to get through here after winning 4 matches to qualify last year, when he then went on to reach the quarterfinals. But at risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record, we are yet to see much from Michael either this season, as he hasn't reached the last 32 of any tournament. And then we also have the record ladies world champion who has won 4 matches this season, however has never won a match at the UK Championship in her last 4 attempts. It could be an open section, but I'm sticking with Jackson to get through. Now, without wanting to completely discount the other players in section 3, this draw looks like it's all about 2 men, Luca Brissell and Stephen Maguire. We are still waiting for Luca to rediscover his A-game. There were flashes last season that could have suggested that he was beginning to find his mojo again, especially that performance to beat Ding at the World Championship. But this season has been tough going, although we cannot discount the fact that he has been openly informing us of the sort of mental health struggles he's been having recently, which is something that he is continuing to work on. Stephen Maguire, on the other hand, is the first man so far in this video that I can say is having a good season, after he landed the Championship League in the summer and then got to the semi-finals in China a couple of weeks ago. And this is a tournament where the Scotsman typically shines, making it to at least the quarter-final stage on 10 further occasions since winning in 2004. Like I say, it feels harsh to completely rule out everyone else in this section, including Fan Zhengyi, who is a former tournament winner, but it feels like it'll be a showdown between Luca and Stephen, and you do have to make Maguire favourite based on the form book. The world number 24 David Gilbert heads up the 4th section of the draw, and if I said this was a tournament that Stephen Maguire loves, the same absolutely cannot be said for Dave, who has never reached a quarterfinal in this tournament despite playing at the event on 22 previous occasions. And would you have guessed it, Dave is also another man coming into this tournament with absolutely zero form behind him, with a run to the last 32 of the Wuhan Open the best he has been able to muster so far. Daniel Wells reached his 4th career semi-final at the Xi'an Grand Prix this season, but again has done very little outside of that tournament. You have to go back to 2020 to find the last time that Daniel played at the Barbican, and that was back when it was a flat 1-2-8 draw. In fact, Daniel has never gotten past the last 64 of the UK Championship in his career. There is a trio of youngsters in this section, headed up by Liam Davis, who did enjoy a run to the last 16 of the British Open a couple of months ago. But in a group lacking any real form to get behind, I'm going to go with Robert Milkins to get through. He's only reached one last 16 this season, but you do often fancy him to qualify for the bigger tournaments, highlighted by him qualifying for the Barbican in each of the past 2 seasons, and he might just be able to use all of his experience to qualify yet again here. Elliot Slessor is one of the most informed players in the qualifiers this year. The world number 21 has reached a semi-final and a quarter-final this season, and it's only taken a red-hot Shaun Murphy to stop him progressing any further than the last 32 in the previous 2 tournaments that he's played in. All of these results have helped him to sit in 9th on the current one-year ranking list, and he'll be hoping to qualify after failing to make it to the Barbican last year. And I am finding it incredibly difficult to look past him here. Martin O'Donnell is a solid enough player, but again, I don't think we've seen enough from him this season to be getting any confidence from. Zach Jurity is probably the only man I see challenging Elliot here, and he does come off the back of making his second career 147 at the International Championship, where he also made it to the quarterfinals, so we know Zach can be an incredibly heavy scorer on his day, but I've still got Slessor to make it through here. The main man in Section 6 is Joe O'Connor, but despite reaching the final of the very first tournament of the season, Joe has failed to make it past the last 32 of any tournament since, so is struggling a little to kick on from the fantastic end to the season he was having last campaign. And Joe does have banana skins here. Ben Wollaston is a man I seem to be discounting a lot recently, none more so than at last year's World Championship, and he does have a knack for proving me wrong. He did beat Jack Lazowski at the Saudi Arabia Masters, but that has been the only real result of any note this season. But is he just lulling me into a false sense of security yet again? Sunny Akani and Lu Hongyu are much better players than what they've been showing this season, but the fact is that they have not reached a last 32 between them all season, and that cannot be overlooked here. Bai Yu Lu, of course, won 3 matches in qualifying last season before falling at the final hurdle, and I would back her to get 1 or maybe 2 wins here as well. It's another section where I don't think players will be coming into the tournament full of confidence, but I will take the easy way out and choose Joe O'Connor to get through. There are 4 players from Hong Kong on the professional circuit this season, and 3 of them find themselves drawn against each other here, with Marco Fu, Jion Yi and Wang Yu Chen all on a collision course with one another. Marco, of course, is the flag bearer as the 2008 UK runner-up, but results have been tough to come by for him this season. That is despite making a fairly healthy total of 12 centuries so far. But this section is littered with big names. The very fact that Jamie Clark is having to start from round 1 in qualifying shows you just how far he has dropped off over the past couple of years. The veteran Mark Davis is a man who may not have many chances left in him to qualify for the Triple Crown events, and a total of just 6 wins all season does not bode well for him in a section stacked with massive obstacles. Matthew Selt, well, he has another chance to make himself the pantomime villain we've become so used to him being, especially after his antics at the World Championship qualifying last season, which really did get under the skin of Jimmy Robertson. Matt is, however, a man to focus on when it comes to qualifying for the big tournaments. Since the UK Championship reverted back to the tiered system, he has qualified every single year. So despite having a fairly quiet season so far, he will no doubt be someone that will have to be scraped off the table. And then we have the top seed in the section, Zhao Yulong, who was within a single frame of landing his first ever title at the English Open in September. When it comes to the UK Championship, Zhao has been to a semi-final and a quarter-final in the past 5 years, although he did fail to qualify last season. You would probably suggest that this is the toughest section of the entire draw to call, but again, I'm playing it safe and going with the highest seed Zhao Yulong to come through. Going into Section 8 now, and this is headed up by 2 big hitters in Stuart Bingham and Anthony McGill. Bingham may be the highest seed in this section, but he has only ventured to the last 16 of a tournament on 2 occasions this season and hasn't got any further than that. Stuart is still such a big tournament player though, that you're almost tempted to completely ignore his current form and trust that he will come alive for the Triple Crown events. The UK title is of course the one tournament he is missing to complete the Triple Crown set, and whilst it would be a long shot backing him to lift the trophy, he cannot be ignored in the qualifiers. But he does also find a man to have reached a ranking event final this season in Anthony McGill in this section as well. For too long, Anthony had seen his career rapidly declining before his performance at the British Open looked to start turning that around. It should be noted, however, that outside of the British Open, Anthony has only made it to the last 16 of a tournament on one further occasion, so that consistency is definitely still lacking. And it really does feel like another section that will come down to the two higher seeds. Scott Donaldson is ever present, but again there is not much in the form guide to suggest that he can mount any kind of challenge here. So a Judgment Day showdown between Bingham and McGill would be very appetising, and on this occasion I'm just fancying Bingham to get through. The world number 19 Ali Carter is the star name in section 9, and Ali's season has been fairly steady without really setting the world on fire. But the 50,000 he won by getting to quarterfinals in Saudi Arabia done his ranking no harm whatsoever. Like Bingham, he is the type of player that you expect to come alive for an event like this, and after failing to qualify in 21 and 2022, he then went on to make it to the Barbican in each of the past 2 years, so we'll be looking to make it a hat-trick this year around. Ricky Walden is another man to have, as you guessed it, a rather poor season so far, only getting past the last 64 of a tournament once. He has also failed to qualify for the UK Championship in each of the last 3 years, so the stats are very much not in his favour. We know how good he is on his day. Unfortunately though, these good days are very few and very far between at the moment. Artemis Zizims is a young prospect who is worth keeping an eye on, but after scoring a couple of decent wins at the start of the season against Si Wei and Ken Doherty, has struggled to get results since, and there is too much experience in this section to see him getting through really. So for me this section looks pretty clear cut, and I can't see beyond Ali Carter making it comfortably through. The 10th seed is an interesting one because there are eye-catching names here, but none are in particularly good form at the moment. Pang Junsu is the highest seed with his current ranking of 30, yet the Chinese Cuban has not made it past the last 32 of any event this season. Noppon Sankam has also been really disappointing for some time now, which is such a shame because a few years ago, I personally thought he had it in him to start knocking on the door of a top 16 spot. You also have to go back to December of last year to find the last time Noppon made it beyond the last 32 of a tournament, which is causing him to rather rapidly start sliding down the rankings. Is 2025 the year Jimmy White qualifies for a BBC event again? It could be argued that he is in a favourable section of the draw here, with a lot of players in no form whatsoever, and he kicks things off against a player who is 49 years younger than him, so to say there is a bit of a generational gap there is an understatement. Liam Highfield and Alexander Ersenbacher are also familiar names, but it has been a long old while since we've seen anything of any real note from either of them. And the final man I'll mention is the man that I actually think will come through, and that is Jordan Brown. It feels like an age since Jordan stunned everyone by beating Ronnie O'Sullivan to win the Welsh Open 4 years ago. Results have been much harder to come by since then, but he did have a good run to the quarterfinals in front of his home crowd in Belfast earlier this season. It really does feel like a section where someone is going to just have to take the bull by the horns to get through, and Jordan is the man I'm backing to do just that. Section 11 of the draw is where we find Hussein Fafai, and I am continuously waiting for Hussein to start making the next step forward in his career. But so far this season, it feels like it's been a case of 2 steps back for him. The Iranian has only won 5 matches all season, which is such a disappointing return for a man who should, in my opinion, starting to be putting himself into contention for titles on a more regular basis. So with a completely out of form top seed here, who could be best placed to take advantage? The veteran Ryan Day hasn't fared much better this season, but he is still clinging on to a steady ranking of 38 in the world. His experience in qualifiers cannot be discounted though, and has qualified for the main stages of this tournament twice in the past 3 years. Oliver Lyons is having a fairly steady season so far, which comes after having arguably his best season as a professional last season. I also remember him getting very close to knocking out Neil Robertson in qualifying last season, and I do feel like he's playing well enough to cause serious issues again here. Ultimately though, I think I'm going to side with Ryan Day's experience to be the order of the day to get through. Now, I am really excited by this next section actually, because here we find Jack Lazowski coming into a Triple Crown event as a ranking event winner. Unfortunately, the lower prize money at a Home Nations tournament compared to most other events means that his win wasn't enough to see him go to York as a seed, but with a huge monkey off of his back now, I'm sure he'll be feeling pretty confident of his chances of qualifying. But Aaron Hill does present a potential stumbling block. The Irishman has made 2 maximum breaks this season and is 24th on the one-year list, so on course to play at the World Grand Prix next year. His overall match play does seem to have gone up a level this season as well, and I don't think he'll be overawed by the prospect of getting through this section. Louis Heathcote is another man in this section to have reached a quarter-final this season, but I'm not quite convinced he'd have enough to lay much of a glove on an informed Jack Lazowski. It's far from a certainty, but I am backing Jack to get through, and if he does, it would not surprise me at all to see him fly at the main event as well. With the earnings from winning the International Championship 2 years ago gone, Zhang Anda has now fallen to 23 in the world, and is set to fall even further still if he doesn't start turning things around this season. That whole campaign was superb for him, but unlike Zhao Guodong, who done something similar last season, Zhang has been unable to push on. He has reached a quarter-final this season, but that result is sandwiched between a lot of early exits in tournaments as well. Chepchiranu is another man who unfortunately seems to have dropped down to mediocrity over the past couple of years. He was never particularly consistent, but those flashes of brilliance we occasionally saw from him just aren't really happening anymore, which is a shame because watching him in full flow is one of the best sights in the sport. And so with the top seeds in this section completely out of form, there may be a chance for someone lower down the rankings to make it through. Robbie Williams has been a handy pick to qualify for the World Championship recently, but when it comes to York, not so much. Since the tournament went back to the old system, Williams has not qualified for the main event. His season has also been very quiet, only getting past the last 64 on one occasion. And then things are even more bleak for Alan Taylor, who has won just 5 matches all season. Robbie McGuigan is of course tipped for big things, but seeing him win 4 matches to qualify feels like a push. And in fact, I'm not sure there's anyone in the draw this year I fancy to win 4 qualifying matches, which is something both Michael Holt and Zhao Xingtong achieved last year. I therefore really don't know where to go here, and I'm simply picking Anu with the hope that he maybe comes alive this tournament, because him at his best would get through here pretty comfortably. The current shootout champion and the world number 26, Tom Ford, heads up this section, and it's been an okayish season so far. His best result coming in Northern Ireland, where he reached the quarterfinals. He's done pretty well at the UK Championship recently as well, reaching the semi-finals in both 2018 and 2022. However, he did fail to qualify last year, so I'm sure he'll be itching to put that right this time around. Zhu Si on paper looks to be a bit of a banana skin, but so far this season he has failed to reach a single last 32, and the majority of his wins this season came in the early stages of the Championship League. Jamie Jones is another familiar face, but he's almost having an identical season to Zhu Si. He is, however, another player that sort of falls under the category of being someone who is fairly reliable in the bigger tournaments, even if his form isn't that great. Lurking in this section are Ashley Hugill and Sam Craigie, who have both played at the Crucible before, but unfortunately the careers they were sort of projected to have some 7 or 8 years ago unfortunately don't look like turning into fruition anytime soon. I think Tom Ford and Jamie Jones are likely to meet in Judgment Day, but I am sticking with Tom to get through. The reigning Scottish Open champion Lee Pai Fan will be hoping to qualify for back-to-back UK championships after making it through the qualifiers 12 months ago. His unorthodox style has served him pretty well over the past year, not only winning the Scottish, but also qualifying for the World Championship, where he beat defending champion Kyron Wilson on the first day, and he also beat Shaun Murphy on his Champion of Champions debut last week as well. Jimmy Robertson is still searching for some form this season, and despite getting wins over players such as Joe O'Connor and Stuart Bingham, hasn't yet got past the last 32 of any tournament. He's also had a pretty miserable record at the UK Championship and hasn't qualified for the past 4 years. Veteran Ken Doherty will be looking to replace commentary duties with an appearance on the bays, but with just 2 wins to his name all season, that may be a tad optimistic. Ben Mertens had a career best performance at the British Open earlier this season, where he reached the last 16. And also don't completely discount Jiang Jun from having a shout in this section too, as he has beaten players such as Hussein Fafai, He Joaquin and Chris Wakelin this season. but I am keeping Li Paifan as my pick here. And then finally, it is the 2024 World Championship runner-up Jack Jones, who is still looking for a way back into the top 16. There have been a couple of positive signs this season, most notably his run to the semi-finals of the British Open, but the jury is still out on deciding on whether this guy can get results on a consistent basis. Hee King is starting to recover from a very slow start to the season, and he has reached the last 16 in 2 of the previous 3 tournaments that he's played in. He did also qualify last year to make his debut at the Barbican, where he went on to get whitewashed by John Higgins in the first round. And then there's 19-year-old Stan Moody, who will be looking to make his own debut at the main event after losing on Judgment Day 12 months ago. And I am going for Stan to do just that in this section. He has already made 2 ranking event quarterfinals this season and is steadily pushing himself up the rankings. He's beaten players like Ali Carter, Ding Junhui, Barry Hawkins and Kyron Wilson this season, so should have no fear regardless of who he plays here, and I don't think it would be much of a shock if he came through either. And there we have it. Those are the 16 men that I have put the kiss of death on. Now, when I predicted the World Championship qualifiers last season, I correctly predicted 11 of the 16 players to make it through, so I am searching for a similar number again here. As always, comment below who you think will make it through, and whether you think there may be any surprise packages lurking in the draw that I've not mentioned. I will then be back after the draw for the main event to go on and preview the main tournament in full.